The Galactic Council was in the middle of one of its most important meetings. Representatives from dozens of different species filled the Grand Hall. The room was enormous, the walls lined with shimmering holograms of the galaxy. Alien delegates from every corner of the universe had gathered, each with their own unique appearance and culture, to discuss a peace treaty with humanity. The peace talks had been going on for months, and now the humans were on the verge of deciding whether they would stay or leave. The atmosphere in the room was tense. The alien species were nervous, and the humans remained calm, their faces unreadable. The alien delegates exchanged worried glances, unsure of what would happen next. The peace treaty was critical for the future of the galaxy. If the humans agreed to it, it would bring stability and peace to the entire region. But if they left, everything could fall apart. The Council had never imagined that the humans would ever consider leaving. They had always believed that humanity would follow the lead of the other species, accepting their terms and joining the peaceful union of the galaxy. But now, humanity's stance had changed. The Council's president, a towering alien from the Vraxer species, stood before the assembly, his voice booming with authority. "We cannot allow this situation to escalate," he said. "Humanity must remain in the peace talks. They are the key to the galaxy's future." His words seemed to hang in the air, but they did little to ease the tension. The human delegation, led by a calm and composed ambassador named John Miller, had made it clear that they would not tolerate the Council's unfair demands any longer. Miller's crew of negotiators had worked hard for months to reach a deal. But the Galactic Council had continuously moved the goalposts, making it impossible for the humans to accept the terms. John Miller stood up, his expression serious. His voice was clear and measured as he addressed the Council. "We are prepared to withdraw from these peace talks," he said, his tone firm. "The terms you are offering are unacceptable. We came here to find peace, but you have failed to respect our position. If things don't change, we will leave." A murmur spread through the room. The alien leaders exchanged uneasy looks. They had thought the humans were just playing hardball, trying to gain leverage in the negotiations. But now, it was becoming clear that the humans were serious. The Vraxer president's voice cut through the murmur. "Ambassador Miller, you must understand that the peace of the galaxy depends on this treaty. If you withdraw, it will not only harm your species, but every species in the galaxy. Think of the consequences." Miller's gaze remained steady. "We have thought of the consequences. But we cannot agree to terms that strip us of our rights. You want to make us part of your union, but you refuse to treat us as equals. We will not accept that." Another delegate, a slender alien with a high musical voice, spoke up. "But the humans are not the only ones who will suffer. There are countless species here that need peace, that need your cooperation. If you leave, the entire galaxy will be thrown into chaos. Are you really willing to risk all that?" John Miller paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the room of alien leaders. He could feel the weight of their words, but his resolve was unshaken. He knew that the peace talks had always been unfair, with humanity being treated as little more than a bargaining chip in the grand game of galactic politics. The aliens might not understand it yet, but humanity had more power than they realized. "We did not come here to create chaos," Miller replied, his voice low but filled with authority. "We came here to be part of something better. But if you cannot respect us, if you cannot treat us fairly, then we have no choice but to leave." The room fell silent. The other delegates were looking at each other, unsure of what to do. The Vraxer president seemed to hesitate, his many eyes narrowing in thought. It was clear that the humans were not bluffing. "Please, Ambassador Miller," the Vraxer leader said, his voice softer now. "We cannot afford to lose humanity's cooperation. The balance of the entire galaxy is at stake." Miller's expression softened slightly, but his stance remained firm. "Then show us the respect we deserve," he said. "We are not asking for much, just fairness, just equality." The silence in the room deepened. It was clear that humanity's position had shifted in a way the Council never expected. The Vraxar president stepped back, his mind racing. Fate of the galaxy, it seemed, now rested in the hands of the humans. "Then we will consider your words carefully," the Vraxar president said after a long pause. "But know this, your decision will echo across the galaxy. If you leave, there will be no going back." With those words, the fate of the peace talks hung in the balance. The humans had made their stand. Now, the Council had to decide whether to meet their demands or risk losing everything. The tension was palpable as the meeting continued. But it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The Galactic Council Hall was a vast chamber, but for the humans, it had never felt more suffocating. As the Vraxar president's last words echoed through the chamber, the humans remained silent, waiting. The tension in the room was thick, like the calm before a storm. And then, with a deliberate motion, John Miller stood up again, his calm voice breaking the silence. "We're leaving," he said simply. "Sci's never leaving the Vraxar leaders. And we're not coming back unless we get what we deserve." A hush fell over the room. The Council's faces shifted from confidence to uncertainty. The representatives of various species exchanged quick glances, their minds spinning, trying to figure out what had just happened. Humanity had done it. They had withdrawn from the peace talks. There had been no warning, no sign that the humans were truly prepared to walk away. The Vraxar president and the rest of the Council had assumed the humans would buckle under pressure, just as every other species had before. The peace talks had been designed with one thing in mind: to bend humanity to their will. But they had underestimated the human spirit. The humans were different. With steady movements, the human delegation began to pack up their documents and leave the Grand Hall. They didn't rush. There was no panic in their actions, no sign of regret. They were simply doing what they had said they would, leaving without looking back. The Vraxar president stood frozen, as if struck by the weight of what had just occurred. His many eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for answers that weren't there. The humans weren't just leaving, they were withdrawing their offer of peace. It was more than a refusal, it was a statement. And that statement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The other delegates were beginning to realize the full extent of what this meant. If humanity left, the entire peace process could crumble. A galaxy that had barely held together through countless conflicts and treaties would now face an uncertain future. Without humanity's involvement, there would be no peace. Without humanity, the Council's fragile unity would begin to splinter. One by one, alien leaders began to speak up, each voice more desperate than the last. But Miller, with his calm demeanor, did not flinch. He wasn't a diplomat pleading for mercy. He was a representative of a powerful species who had had enough of the Council's deceit. "We didn't come here to beg for your peace," Miller said. His voice was firm, his gaze unwavering. "We came here because we believed that a fair future for all species was possible. But you have failed to respect that. You failed to respect us." A high-ranking delegate from the Zixi species, a species known for their long lifespan and wisdom, stepped forward. "Ambassador Miller, please do not rush into this. The Council can revise the terms. We can work together. This is not the end." Miller shook his head, his hands folding in front of him. "You don't understand. It's not about the terms anymore. It's about how we've been treated. It's about trust. We thought we were building something, but it was just a trap for us to fall into." Another voice, this time from a younger delegate of the Talnari species, full of emotion, echoed through the room. "Do you realize what you're doing? If humanity leaves, the peace will collapse. The chaos that follows will be on your hands, Ambassador Miller. But Miller didn't look shaken. You're not listening. If peace comes at the cost of our dignity, then it isn't peace, it's a farce. You want our cooperation, then show us that you see us as equals. Until then, we'll find our own way. And with that, the humans stood, turning their backs on the assembly of alien leaders. There was no grand exit, just a steady, measured walk to the doors. The hum of the chamber fell into an eerie silence as the doors closed behind them. Outside. The grand hall, the human delegation gathered in a private chamber away from the eyes of the council. Miller looked at his team, each one of them steadfast and calm. It had been a hard decision, but it had been the right one. "We've done it," Miller said, his voice filled with both relief and resolve. "The message has been sent. They'll understand soon enough." The rest of the delegation nodded. No one spoke, but the weight of their actions hung in the air. The peace talks had ended, but humanity's fight was just beginning. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the council station, they knew one thing for certain. There would be no going back. Meanwhile, back in the council hall, chaos had erupted. The delegates were in an uproar, scrambling to understand what had just happened. The Vraxer president, now visibly shaken, pounded his fist on the table. "What do we do now?" he demanded, his voice cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. The representatives of the other species argued amongst themselves. Some blamed the humans for being unreasonable, while others blamed the council for mishandling the negotiations. In the midst of the confusion, it was clear. Humanity's withdrawal had shattered the illusion of unity. In the deep silence that followed, one thing was painfully clear. The galaxy had just been handed a new reality. The humans had shown their strength, and the council had failed to see it until it was too late. The Galactic Council was in turmoil. The sudden departure of humanity had sent shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy, and now the once unified assembly of species found themselves teetering on the edge of chaos. The Grand Hall, which had once been filled with confident discussions and diplomatic pleasantries, now echoed with frantic voices, each delegate attempting to make sense of what had just unfolded. The Vraxer president, a towering figure whose calm demeanor had once commanded the room, now paced nervously in the center of the hall, his many eyes darting from one alien leader to the next. The once so cheered air of the council was gone, replaced by a growing sense of panic. The humans had not only withdrawn from the peace talks, they had made it clear they would no longer be a part of the galaxy's future peace unless they were treated as equals. The implications were profound. If humanity truly refused to return, the galaxy would lose its most powerful asset in maintaining peace. Humanity had not only brought technological advancements, but it also played a key role in keeping the balance between the various factions. Without them, the delicate web of peace that held the galaxy together would unravel, and the wars of the past would pale in comparison to what might come. "Do they really think they can walk away from us?" A delegate from the Helkari species, a long-limbed creature with bright orange skin, sneered. "Humans are nothing but a temporary anomaly. The galaxy will survive without them." His words were met with sharp rebuttals. The Exorans, a species of silver-scaled beings with sharp intelligence, exchanged anxious glances. "That might have been true before," one said quietly, "but their technology, their resolve, we've underestimated them. If humanity withdraws for good, we risk everything." The Vraxer president raised a clawed hand, silencing the room. "We cannot allow this to spiral out of control," he muttered, his voice low. "But how do we bring them back? How do we fix what we've broken?" For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of the situation hung in the air. The council, so accustomed to being in control, now found itself at the mercy of the very species. It had hoped to manipulate. They had always assumed humanity would bend, had always treated them as a lesser force. But in this single moment, they had realized their mistake. Humanity was not weak, far from it. The humans had strength, and it wasn't just in their technology. It was in their will, in their drive, in their refusal to be pushed aside. "I've sent multiple messages to Ambassador Miller," a Telnari delegate said nervously, holding a datapad that had just buzzed with a new transmission. "But he hasn't responded. The humans are completely ignoring us." The Vraxar president slammed his fist against the table, sending a ripple through the holographic projections floating above it. "We cannot afford to let them slip away. We have to offer them something they can't refuse. We have to show them we are willing to meet their demands." "But what if they don't want peace anymore?" asked a dark, shadowy figure from the Uxari species whose form was barely visible in the dim light. "What if we have pushed them too far?" Another delegate, a sleek and poised representative from the Galalaxian species, leaned forward. "Perhaps. It is time we admit the truth," she said softly. "Humanity has always been different from us, stronger in ways we never understood. They may not need the Council's peace. They may be building something bigger. They've already withdrawn from us once. What's stopping them from leaving permanently?" Her words stung. The room fell silent again, each delegate lost in their thoughts. If the humans truly left, the galaxy would lose its best chance at unity. And the consequences? They were unthinkable. Factions would break apart, war would become inevitable, and the galaxy would fall back into the chaos that had once defined it. It was not just a matter of diplomacy anymore. It was survival. "We have to act fast," the Vraxar president said, his voice more urgent now. "Let's send more envoys, more diplomats. This is not just about pride. This is about saving our future. Humanity is our last hope for peace, and we will not lose them to our own mistakes." He turned to his closest advisors. "Find out everything you can about their leaders, their demands, their fears. We need to understand them, not as our equals, but as our partners. Only then can we begin to rebuild what we've broken." The council's room fell into a flurry of activity, with delegates scrambling to make plans, send messages, and gather intelligence. But amidst the confusion, one question remained unanswered. Would the humans even listen? They had made their stance clear, and now it was up to the council to decide if they were willing to swallow their pride and meet humanity on equal terms. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy held its breath. The humans had shown their power in a way no one had expected. They had shown that they were not afraid to walk away from everything the council had to offer. Now the galaxy was left to wonder, could peace still be salvaged? Or had the council's arrogance destroyed any chance of reconciliation? In a far corner of the galaxy, John Miller sat in a quiet room, watching the stars outside his window. He knew what the council was thinking. They were panicking. They were scared. And that, to him, was the first sign that humanity had finally gained the respect they deserved. In the quiet of his private quarters aboard the human ship Resolution, Ambassador John Miller sat in contemplation. The stars stretched out before him, a cold reminder of the vastness of space, and yet, in this moment, the galaxy felt smaller than ever. Humanity had made their decision clear. They were no longer going to be part of the Galactic Council's false peace, not unless their demands were met. But now, the question loomed over Miller and his team. What would the next move be? The withdrawal from the peace talks had sent shockwaves through the council, but that wasn't enough. For years, humanity had been treated as a secondary player. In galactic diplomacy, forced into negotiations by powerful alien species that saw them as little more than pawns in their endless political games. But humanity had not come this far to play the part of the pawn. It was time to show the galaxy that humans were not just survivors, They were forces to be reckoned with. "We have their attention now," Miller said to his team, gathered around a holly table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the projections. "But that's not enough. We can't just wait for them to come crawling back. We need to take control of this situation to shift the power back to where it belongs." His words were met with nods of agreement. The team, composed of military strategists, diplomats, and key advisors, understood the gravity of the situation. The humans had played by the Council's rules for too long, and now it was time to rewrite the game. Humanity would set the terms. It would no longer beg for peace. They would demand it. "First, we need to secure our position," said Captain Laura Holt, a seasoned military officer who had been instrumental in humanity's recent rise in power. "We know the Council's weaknesses. We've been watching their every move. They think they can bully us back into negotiations, but we have the upper hand now." "We need leverage," Miller responded, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "We know the Council is divided. Some factions are already considering concessions. We need to make sure they can't come together without us." The plan began to take shape, a strategy based not on military force alone, but on the subtle art of political manipulation and economic pressure. The humans had learned much from their years in the galaxy, and now it was time to put that knowledge to use. The Council thought they could dismiss humanity, but they had never understood the full extent of what humanity was capable of. Miller turned to his team. "We'll begin with a simple gesture showing the galaxy that humanity's withdrawal is not a bluff. I want diplomatic channels to remain open, but let's make it clear that any attempt to go forward without us will have consequences." One of the younger diplomats, a sharp-eyed strategist named Eliza Vance, spoke up. "If we withdraw from the peace talks permanently, we risk chaos. The Council is already scrambling, and if we push too hard, we could face backlash from those factions who are already hesitant about this treaty. How far are we willing to go?" Miller's gaze hardened. "We've already gone too far to turn back. They've already underestimated us. If we allow them to come back to the table without recognizing our worth, we'll be no different than we were before, just pawns in their game. It's time we make our own path." The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of his words sank in. The stakes were higher than ever, and the decisions made in the next few hours would determine the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. "We need to make sure they know we are not isolated," Miller continued. "We've already reached out to several neutral and fringe factions. It's time we start talking about forming our own coalition, one that will challenge the Council's influence. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about making a stand." The members of his team nodded. They had heard rumors of humanity's growing influence, not only among the more fringe species, but even within the inner circles of the Council's rivals. It wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about humanity carving out its own future. Miller activated a holographic map of the galaxy. Small dots appeared across the star systems, representing alien species who had already begun to show interest in humanity's withdrawal from the peace talks. Each one of these species, while not powerful enough to stand alone, could make a significant impact if united. "We'll reach out to the Venorians first," Holt suggested, pointing to a group of star systems along the eastern edge of the galaxy. "They've always been on the fence about the Council. If we can get them on our side, it will send a clear message to the other factions. And then we'll turn to the Zimmerans," Vance added, pointing to another set of systems. "They have a significant military presence in the Outer Rim. If we can get them to stand with us, the Council will have no choice but to listen." Miller nodded. "Exactly. We don't need to convince the entire galaxy, just enough to make the Council realize they can't go on without us. We'll show them that peace is no longer just about the Council, it's about the future we want to build." The plan was set into motion almost immediately. Diplomatic messages were sent, covert operations were planned, and ambassadors were dispatched to strengthen alliances with species who had long been marginalized by the Council's reign. Humanity had already begun to shift the balance of power. It wasn't a military coup, but a strategic and intellectual one that would make the Council realize the strength they had been blind to. Back aboard the Resolution, Miller stood, looking out at the stars once more, the weight of the coming days pressing down on him. But this time, the stars didn't feel so cold. They felt full of possibility. Humanity had shown its strength. Now, it was time to build the future on their own terms. The Galactic Council had never been in a situation like this. The alien species, who once held dominance over the galaxy, were now beginning to realize that humanity was no longer the weak, new player they had once thought. The peace talks, which had seemed like a formality for so long, were quickly becoming the greatest challenge the Council had ever faced. It had been days since humanity's withdrawal from the talks, and the galaxy's power structure was shifting. The Council's first attempt to simply replace humanity with another negotiating partner had failed spectacularly. More and more factions were rallying behind the humans, and the Council's usual methods of diplomacy were no longer as effective as they once were. Inside the grand halls of the Council, the air was thick with tension. Alien representatives from across the galaxy filled the chambers, but their discussions were far from the confident, unified exchanges of old. The once strong leaders now bickered amongst themselves, pointing fingers, trying to find someone to blame for the fiasco. The Vraxer president, the once commanding figure at the head of the Council, stood at the front, his claws trembling slightly as he addressed the assembly. His many eyes scanned the room, but his usual calm was gone, replaced with frustration. He had always believed that humanity was simply another species to be controlled, an eager participant in the greater galactic order. Now, the humans had proven that they were not only capable of walking away, they were capable of destabilizing the entire system. Everyone said this was inevitable. The Vraxer leader muttered under his breath that humanity was too volatile, too unpredictable. His voice was low, filled with an edge of regret. I was wrong. The other leaders nodded solemnly. Some of them, the more traditional factions, had been pushing for a hardline stance against humanity. They believed that the human withdrawal was a bluff, a tactical move that would eventually be called, but with each passing day, it became clear that humanity wasn't bluffing. It's not just that humanity withdrew from the peace talks, said an alien from the Telnari species, his voice shaky with a mix of anxiety and anger. It's that they made it clear they have the power to walk away from the entire galactic structure. They're playing a different game now. A murmur spread through the room as more leaders joined the conversation. Some were deeply concerned. Others were beginning to panic. The Exerans, who had once been staunch supporters of the Council, exchanged fearful glances. We cannot afford to let this continue, one of them said. Humanity is no longer asking for peace there, demanding respect, and they have the strength to enforce it. The Council president tried to regain some semblance of control. He slammed his fist on the table. We must stop this before it's too late. We cannot allow humanity to split the galaxy into factions. We cannot allow them to tear down everything we've built. But how? Asked a delegate from the Galaxians, her voice betraying her fear. They are one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. We've spent years undermining their influence, and now they hold the cards. How do we even begin to undo what we've done? A long pause followed. The room was heavy with silence, the weight of the Council's failure hanging over them. The Vraxer leader finally broke the silence. We underestimated them. We assumed they would bend, just like every other species we've dealt with. But they haven't. They've done the impossible. They've turned the tables. The Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the truth sinking in. The humans had done something that no one else had been able to do. They had exposed the cracks in the Council's facade. For the first time, the galaxy was seeing that humanity was not just another race to be manipulated, was a force to be reckoned with. "We need to make an offer," the Vraxar president said, his voice filled with a mixture of desperation and resolve. "A real offer, not just empty promises. We need to show humanity that we are willing to meet them halfway, that we are ready to respect them as equals." A murmur of agreement swept across the room, but it was clear that the Council's authority was crumbling. They had already lost humanity's trust, and now they had to figure out how to win it back. The task seemed insurmountable. In the weeks that followed, the Council made its move. Diplomatic channels to humanity were reopened, but this time the tone was different. The messages were no longer filled with demands or condescension. They were filled with offers of cooperation, of recognition, of equality. The Council was finally willing to meet humanity's terms, but would it be enough? Back on the Resolution, John Miller and his team watched the Council's responses. With caution, humanity had been clear in their demands: respect, equality, and a place at the table as true equals, not as a subjugated species. And the Council's new tone was promising, but Miller knew that actions spoke louder than words. "They're scared," Miller said quietly to his team as they reviewed the latest transmissions from the Council. "They realize now what we've known all along. They can't maintain control if they don't have us with them." Laura Holt, the military officer who had been with Miller through all of humanity's most critical moments, nodded. "They're trying to save face, but they've already lost their authority. They'll have to do a lot more than talk to make us trust them again." Vance, the sharp-eyed diplomat, glanced at the transmission. "It's not just about the Council anymore. We have leverage, and we're going to use it. We're not just a negotiating partner anymore. We're the future of this galaxy, and they have to realize that." Miller's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the transmission once more. "We're not just going to take part in their peace, we're going to redefine it." As the humans prepared to send their response, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The Council had realized their mistake, but whether they could recover from it and convince humanity to return remained to be seen. One thing was certain: the balance of power had shifted, and humanity was no longer just another player in the game. They were the ones who would decide the galaxy's future. The tension in the air was palpable as the transmission from the Galactic Council arrived on the Resolution. The humans, having long expected to receive some form of diplomatic message, now watched closely as the holographic message flickered to life in the conference room. For the first time, the Council wasn't demanding, wasn't playing their usual political games they were asking. The holographic figure of the Vraxar president appeared, his multiple eyes flickering with uncertainty, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. The usual authority he projected seemed to have vanished, replaced by something far less certain. He spoke, his words measured, almost pleading. "Ambassador Miller," he began, the weight of his words clear in every syllable. "We understand now that the situation is more complex than we realized. We have wronged you, and for that, we are sorry. The Council, as it stands, was built on principles of unity, but it has faltered. You were right to withdraw." Miller sat still, his gaze unwavering. He had expected this moment: the apology, the recognition, but the question remained: was it too little, too late? He let the Vraxar president's words sink in before he responded. "Apologies are a start, but they are not enough," Miller said coolly, his voice steady. "You failed to respect humanity's place in the galaxy. You've underestimated us, pushed us aside, and treated us as if we were insignificant. Now, you want us to believe that you've changed?" The Vraxar leader shifted uncomfortably, as if the weight of humanity's words was too heavy for him to bear. "We were wrong, Ambassador, and we know that actions speak louder than words. We are willing to offer you something we have never offered any species before: true equality. Full recognition as a member of the Galactic Council, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities that come with it." The room went silent. To most of the galaxy, the offer would have been seen as a breakthrough and unprecedented shift in the power structure. But Miller knew better. This wasn't a sudden act of goodwill. It was desperation. The Council was not offering humanity equality out of respect. Teat was offering it because they had no other choice. "Why now?" Miller asked, his tone skeptical. "Why should we trust you after everything you've done? After all the promises broken, the manipulation, the games?" The Raxor president's holographic figure flickered for a moment as if the weight of his failure was too much to carry. "Because we have seen what we are without you. The galaxy is in danger of falling into chaos. Without humanity, without your strength, we cannot maintain the peace. You are the key to the galaxy's future, and we are willing to do whatever it takes to have you back." Miller glanced at his team, his expression unreadable. The Council's plea was genuine, but it felt hollow. The Vraxor leader's words, though carefully chosen, were dripping with the desperation of a system that had lost control. The galaxy, which had once operated in the shadows of its own dominance, was now exposed for its weakness. Miller took a deep breath, considering his response carefully. "You've underestimated us for far too long. You thought we would always need your peace, your protection. But we don't. We've been doing just fine without you. And now, you want us to believe that this is about the galaxy's future, not just your own survival." The Vraxor president's eyes lowered, his voice softening. "You are right. It is about our survival. But it is also about yours. If we do not come together, the galaxy will descend into war. The factions you've already aligned with may not stand with you forever. We've seen how quickly things can change." The admission stung, but it was the truth. The Vraxor had been right about one thing: humanity's influence was growing. But so were the tensions between the galaxies. Factions. The Council had not just failed humanity, they had also failed to maintain the balance of power. Now, the consequences were clear. Either humanity returned to the fold, or the entire galaxy risked descending into anarchy. "We don't need you to save us," Miller said slowly. "But we do need to rebuild the galaxy. And if we're going to do that, it has to be on our terms, not yours, not the Council's." The Vraxor president nodded, understanding the weight of Miller's words. "Then tell us what you need. What will it take for you to return to the talks? What must we do to earn your trust?" Miller paused, allowing the question to hang in the air. The stakes were high, and the decision he was about to make would determine humanity's place in the galaxy forever. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "We want full autonomy. We want to be recognized as an equal partner in this galaxy, not as an afterthought. We will no longer settle for scraps from the table. If we join the Galactic Council, it will be on our terms, and we will hold the same authority as every other member. No more manipulation, no more power games." The Vraxor president listened, his multiple eyes focused on the human ambassador. "And if we agree to this, what is your response?" Miller stood tall, his resolve unwavering. "We will return. But this time, it will be because we choose to, not because you forced our hand." The transmission ended, and the room fell silent. Miller's team exchanged looks, each of them understanding the gravity of the moment. The Galactic Council had made its plea, but whether they would follow through remained to be seen. Humanity had made its demands clear now. The ball was in the Council's court. Miller turned to his team, his expression thoughtful but resolute. "Let's see if they're willing to follow through." If they are, we might just change the galaxy for good. Outside the resolution, the galaxy waited. The fate of peace hung in the balance, and humanity had just shown the Council that peace was no longer a gift, was a responsibility, one that could no longer be taken for granted. The days that followed the Galactic Council's transmission were filled with tension. Humanity's terms had been laid out clearly: full autonomy, equal standing, and a commitment to fair treatment as genuine partners, not pawns. The Council's response would determine not only the future of peace in the galaxy, but also the very balance of power. On the resolution, John Miller and his team gathered once more in the conference room. The hum of the ship's engines was a steady backdrop to the uncertainty that hung in the air. The message from the Council had not yet arrived, but the anticipation was unbearable. For the first time in human history, their fate was not just in their own hands, was in the hands of the very alien species they had once been forced to obey. Miller paced in front of the team, his mind racing. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "If the Council agrees to our terms, we take our place as equals. If they don't, we walk. And we'll find a way to make sure the galaxy understands." "Why?" Captain Laura Holt nodded, her hands folded across her chest. "We've shown them what we're capable of. They know it. The question is whether they can swallow their pride and make the right choice. If they want us back, they'll have to admit they were wrong." Eliza Vance, the diplomatic strategist, remained silent for a moment, her eyes focused on the stars outside the viewport. "They've already admitted they were wrong. But I don't know if that's enough. They've spent so long at the top of the galaxy's hierarchy, controlling the narrative. Giving up that power won't be easy for them." Miller stopped pacing and turned toward his team. "We've made them see our strength, but now we have to make sure they understand our value. If they think they can simply placate us with a few gestures, they're wrong. We've earned more than just a seat at the table." As Miller spoke, the room grew quieter. The anticipation was overwhelming. The humans had taken a bold step. Walking away from peace talks that had once seemed like their only option, but now they were in control. Humanity had shifted the galaxy's power dynamics without ever firing a shot. The question remained, would the Council recognize that strength? Or would they let their pride destroy what was left of the fragile peace? The silence was broken by a sudden beep from the communications console. Miller's heart skipped a beat as he strode over and activated the transmission. The image of the Vraxar president flickered into view, his form looking worn and tired. A sharp contrast to the confident leader who had once led the Council. This time, there was no arrogance in his voice, only a quiet sense of resolve. "Ambassador Miller," the Vraxar president began, "we have reviewed your terms, and after much deliberation, the Galactic Council has come to a decision." Miller held his breath, his team behind him, waiting for the words that would determine their future. The Vraxar leader continued, his voice steady but filled with an unmistakable weight. "The Council agrees to your terms. Humanity will be recognized as an equal member of the Galactic Council with all the rights and privileges that come with it. Your autonomy is guaranteed. We are ready to rebuild the future of the galaxy together." For a moment, the room was silent. The words hung in the air like a fragile promise, a moment of history unfolding. The Council had done it. They had swallowed their pride and accepted humanity's terms. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity had become the cornerstone of that change. Miller's face remained expressionless, but inside, he felt a wave of relief mixed with triumph. He had expected a hard fight, but this was a victory beyond what he had ever hoped for. The future was now in humanity's hands. "Thank you," Miller replied, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "We accept your offer, but remember, this is just the beginning. Our cooperation will be based on respect, equality, and the understanding that we are not here to be controlled. We are here to work together as equals." The Vraxar president nodded, his many eyes focused on Miller. "We understand, Ambassador. We have much to learn from you, and we are committed to this new path." As the transmission ended, the team broke into quiet conversation, their expressions a mix of disbelief and pride. The humans had done it. They had secured their place in the galaxy, not as subordinates, but as equals. And with that, they had set the stage for a new era of cooperation and peace. But as the celebration began, Miller's mind remained focused on the long road ahead. This was just the first step. Humanity's position in the galaxy had been secured, but the real work was only beginning. There would be challenges, no doubt. There would be those who resisted this shift in power, both within the Council and across the galaxy. But humanity had proven that it could stand on its own. They had fought for respect, and they had earned it. "We've got a long way to go," Miller said, breaking the quiet. "But this is our chance to shape the future. Let's make sure we do it right."